What's up everyone, welcome to the channel, and today I'm going to be giving you my full card predictions and betting breakdown for UFC Fight Night Chris Curtis versus Brenden Allen. Let's start out with the first fight of the night, which is Melissa Mullins, also known as Melissa Dixon, versus Nora Cornolle. In this matchup, I'm going with Melissa Mullins. I think she can get the takedowns in this matchup, and she can look like a very solid price tag if she has the performance that I think she will have, but there's also a very solid chance that she gets her takedown stuff because I'm not super high on her takedown entries, and Nora Cornolle is the better striker. Ultimately, I do think that Melissa Mullins is decent enough to have enough of a threat on the feet to find the takedowns, and then once the fight is down on the ground, I don't see Nora Cornolle really getting back up to the feet all that much. And like I said, I don't see her stuffing the takedowns. I think Melissa Dixon wins this. I'm going to say 30-27 decision. Maybe a submission. I kind of doubt it though, but we will see. Like I said, Nora Cornolle is the better striker. I would not play Melissa Dixon at minus 320 or whatever, minus 300, whatever it is. I almost would never play any women's MMA fighter at minus 300 ever. So don't play it. Maybe sprinkle Nora Cornolle, but I wouldn't even do that because I'm not picking her. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Budka versus Cesar Almeida. In this matchup, I'm taking Cesar Almeida, and fairly confidently too. I know Budka has good wrestling, and Cesar Almeida is a Glory Kickboxing ex-fighter that's beaten Alex Pereira once, but he's good, man. I'm sorry, he is good. And on the Contender Series, I know he fought Lukasz Fernando, and I've seen a lot of people saying this. Well, Lukasz Fernando just got out-grappled in his last fight by, I want to say his name is Azamat Bekoev, and Budka stuffed the takedowns from Azamat Bekoev, and he went to a split decision, and he had success against Azamat Bekoev, who seems like a great prospect. First off, Budka has good takedown defense. I'm not going to take that away from Budka, but outside of that, he is horrible everywhere else. Like, his striking is bad. And he went to split decision striking with Azamat Bekoev because Azamat Bekoev's striking is not that good in my opinion. So it's a little bit weird to see how that all goes out. But a lot of people are just taking the fact that, oh, well, you know, if Lukasz Fernando landed takedowns on Cesar Almeida, that means that Cesar Almeida's grappling sucks. When that's just not true, because certain fighters are better at landing offensive takedowns than defending takedowns themselves. It's kind of weird how that works out, but just because they've gotten taken down before doesn't mean they're a completely crap grappler. Like Norma Dumont is a girl that a lot of people are saying is a grappler that can find takedowns on Germaine, Randemie later on in this card. I'll obviously break that fight down, but that's a girl that they're viewing as a pretty solid grappler in the division that can find some takedowns, but she got taken down 6 times by Macy Chiasson, but she's still viewed as a pretty solid grappler. There's other examples too of solid grapplers getting taken down but still being able to find takedowns of their own. I don't know if that's the most perfect example because Norma Dumont isn't really known for her wrestling, but she's used her wrestling to bring success, and a lot of people are picking Norma Dumont because of her wrestling in that matchup. That's just one that comes to mind very recently. But essentially what I'm getting at here is Lukasz Fernando, I think, had pretty solid offensive takedowns against Cesar Almeida in that Contender Series fight. Now, if you don't know who Cesar Almeida is, obviously he's beat Alex Pereira once in kickboxing and lost to him 2 other times, but what was really impressive about that, all 3 of those fights went to decision. That means Cesar Almeida has a very solid chin. If you haven't watched any of his Glory Kickboxing fights, I have watched a lot of them because I was kind of shocked at how good this guy was. Because you see, okay, he's got a solid record, but he's losing to the top guys. I do follow a little bit of Glory Kickboxing myself, and I went out there, I watched his fights with Donovan Wisa, who's one of the best Glory Kickboxing fighters there is right now. Pound for pound, one of the top guys, looking like a really, really solid champion of the middleweight division. He had competitive fights with him both times, and he has gnarly calf kicks. He's got pretty solid boxing. Like I said, he does have a very good chin. I do know that because he does get hit, but he recovers pretty damn well. He beat this guy named Serkan. I can't remember his last name, but that's still a very high-level middleweight fighter, and he beat the brakes off of him for the first 2 rounds, and then he started to slow down. I do kind of worry about his cardio a little bit here. Budka does have good cardio, and obviously he has a bunch of wrestling accolades. I think he's like a college, maybe not All-American, but some high-level college degree of wrestling. He's got all the high school accolades for wrestling. I think state champion, if not national champion, but I'd go off of the tape. I'm not going to go out here just because, oh, well, kickboxer versus wrestler, he's got more accolades, I'm going to pick the rest. I'm not just going to do that. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you that I've watched film with Budka, and I hate his takedown entries. I think they're slow. I think he reaches in a way where he's almost reaching with his arms so wide that opponents find underhooks very easily, and almost every single time this guy is shooting in on takedown, they got either double underhooks or they got an underhook and a whizza almost every single time. And Cesar Almeida, to me, I liked his grappling on the Dana White's Contender Series. I know we got taken down by Lukasz Fernando, and this might be a hot take, what I'm about to say right now, but I think those first 2 takedowns, especially that second takedown, I want to say, where Lukasz Fernando ducked under Cesar Almeida's striking, not his striking, his overhand right, and then well-timed that takedown might be the toughest takedown Cesar Almeida will have to deal with compared to the 2 fights out of the 2. In other words, I think that takedown specifically is going to be a much tougher takedown for Cesar Almeida to defend than compared to any of the takedowns I see coming from Dylan Budka in this fight. Now, that's going to be a little bit of a hot take. I understand that Dylan Budka, on paper, is the better wrestler, but the thing about Lukasz Fernando is he has a striking threat, and he knows what he's doing on the feet, and he was able to time some very solid takedowns. Now, obviously, if you're going to tell me who I think has the better pure offensive wrestling, it's going to be Dylan Budka, but it's a lot tougher and trickier to defend Lukasz Fernando, who's a guy that has power on the feet, very long and rangy guy, and actually exploded into that takedown entry very well. Now, there were a couple of sloppy takedown entries from him. I completely understand that. I'm not going to spend this whole time breaking down the Lukasz Fernando fight, but essentially, if you didn't watch it, Cesar Almeida stuffed the majority of the takedowns. When he got taken down, he worked back up to the feet pretty well. He did get put in a bad position where he was almost submitted by a rear naked choke, but he fought through it slowly, was very patient, was in a body triangle, and then reversed the body triangle and poured down nasty ground and pound. Although he's a glory kickboxer, the dude has great ground and pound, and he is not a guy that you want on top of him. Another example, round 2, stuffs, I want to say the first 2 takedowns coming his way from Lukasz Fernando. And then Fernando pulls guard, and then he gets 10-8'd because Cesar Almeida is beating the brakes off of him from on top. And I looked at Dylan Budka's career. He's getting his takedowns stuffed by bumps. And you could say, well, that was like 7 fights ago. Okay, well, 7 fights ago was like 2 years ago. Dylan Budka's been very active, so I give him a lot of credit for that. But still, man, he's getting his takedown stuffed by bums. When he's getting these bums down, there's multiple scenarios where they are reversing and ending up on top. And I think Cesar Almeida could potentially find himself on top if Dylan Budka is getting a little bit sloppy. I don't like Dylan Budka's submission game. I don't like his striking. What I do like, and I will give him more than enough credit here, is that he's very good at keeping the fight within the clinch and making sure his opponents can't do much in the clinch because he will hold on to you. And he will pull you in close so you can't land knees in the clinch, and he will keep you there for time on end. I could not believe the UFC signed this guy. I'm going to go a little bit into depth on this fight because I've done a lot of research, and I'm pretty passionate about my underdog and Cesar Almeida here. But the annoying part is I could see Dylan Budka winning this fight by just finding takedowns, mat return, mat return, mat return. I don't see him holding down Cesar Almeida all that much. I think Cesar Almeida will be able to work back up to the feet slowly, but my worry is that he just hangs out in the clinch the whole time. More of Dylan Budka, because Cesar Almeida against Lukasz Fernando was exploding on the clinch, doing whatever he could to get out of the clinch, getting out of the grappling exchanges, the clinch, whatever. But Dylan Budka will do everything in his path to hold you in the clinch. He won't try to win the fight. He won't try to do well with the striking. Sometimes he won't even look for takedowns. He'll just hold you in the clinch as tight as possible, give you a really tight hug. It's really annoying, really boring to watch. And why I say I could not believe that they signed Dylan Budka is because on the Contender Series against Chad Hannacombe, Dana White said, oh, well, Dylan Budka had such a boring performance because his opponent was so boring. And I'm like, all right, Dana, go back and watch any other Dylan Budka fight. What does he do? He does exactly that. He wants to sit there in the clinch, and he wants to stare at you in the eyes. I hate his fighting style. I understand he's been through a lot, so maybe he's a nice guy. Maybe I'm ripping into him a little bit too much, but I hate his fighting style, and I think he sucks. I really just think he sucks. I've seen trash cans reverse him, end up on top. And sure, like I said, he can find takedowns. He can win this in the clinch. He really can. And that's what freaking pisses me off because Cesar Almeida is badass. Like, his striking is badass. Great calf kicks, solid power. Switch stances pretty well, good head kicks, but really powerful hands. He's got some solid boxing. Maybe not the greatest head movement. He does get hit, excuse me. But he can land the bigger shots, and he is tough as shit. And he's looking good on the scales. He's looking more shredded than I have seen him before. I feel like there's something else that I want to mention here, but I'm just going to leave it at, I have watched this guy at Glory Kickboxing hang with the best of the best, and I'm not just talking about Alex Pereira. I'm talking about Donovan Wisa. I'm talking about Serkan Olegjacek. I don't think Olegjacek's his last name. That's Mikhail Olegjacek. But I've seen him hang with the top of the Glory Kickboxers. He's shown good athleticism. Against Lukasz Fernando, when he was taken down, he worked through positions very, very cautiously, got back up to the feet, and did what he needed to do, showed pretty decent submission defense. I trust him. I trust him to a decent degree. I honestly do. And like I said, Lukasz Fernando, with the striking threat that he has and his ability to time takedowns within striking exchanges, I think they will be better and dangerous than the takedowns from Dylan Budka, who has very slow takedown entries. Now, if Dylan Budka was to win this fight and I was to give him some advice, I would say, Dylan Budka, go to your trips, because Cesar Almeida and the newer grapplers to MMA seem to struggle with trips. But Cesar Almeida pretty good at stuffing takedowns, just sprawling takedowns, I'll say. So I've gone on about this fight too much. Cesar Almeida is the better striker, and it's not close. Dylan Budka does have a good chin. He does have probably the better cardio, but Cesar Almeida I don't think is going to fall off a cliff. And I think he'll have opportunities to rest within the clinch as well, because Dylan Budka is not going to be doing much. I think the way that this fight is going to go, Cesar Almeida is going to stuff some of the takedowns. We're going to be chilling in the clinch a lot. This could look like McGee versus Chidi Njokuani without as much work being done within the clinch and just absolutely nothing happening, and the ref being fed up, and we're going to have this fight separated from the clinch time after time after time again. I have been talking about this fight so much. Anyways, that's where I'm going to leave it at. I'm going to say two 30-27 scorecards, maybe one 29-28. I'll say actually maybe two 29-28s, one 30-27 in favor of Cesar Almeida by decision. I hate the fact that Dylan Budka can win this fight by making it boring, and that's probably the only way that he does win this fight. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Jean Matsumoto versus Dan Argueta. I'm going with Jean Matsumoto. I think this is a fantastic prospect. When I look at the guys on Dana White's Contender Series from last season, this is one of the guys that I am the highest on. I would tell you guys that this is the prospect you should look out for, but this is sort of a very interesting matchup for him because he is very well-rounded. He is a BJJ black belt. I want to say a Muay Thai black belt. Some gyms have belt rankings for Muay Thai and whatnot, but that's not really the issue of the matter. The point is, he's a very good striker. He's got good straight punches, he's got good combinations, and he's got great low kicks. I want to say he fights, is it orthodox? I think he switches stances at times. He's more of an orthodox fighter, if I'm remembering in my head correctly. But BJJ black belt, solid submission game. From what I have seen and the fights that I have watched, he has shown some solid takedown defense. I know he was taken down twice on the Contender Series, and he is facing a pure wrestler here in Dan Argueta, which is why this is a little bit of a concerning matchup, because we have seen these well-rounded fighters that are the better, more well-rounded fighters, just the better fighters in overall, lose to these specialists in one certain category, more specifically the wrestlers / grapplers. When I look at Jean Matsumoto, he is the much better striker. He has probably cardio on the same exact level, and I think he has the better submission game. The question is whether or not he can stuff the takedowns, because if he doesn't stuff the takedowns, Dan Argueta is a tough guy to get out from under. That doesn't make sense. He's a tough guy to get back up to your feet against when you are on bottom, is essentially what I was trying to say there. But the way that I see this fight going, I see Jean Matsumoto floating around the outside, making it tough for Dan Argueta to close the distance to find the takedowns, because Jean Matsumoto has very solid footwork. He'll float around the edge, he'll land a couple of low kicks, he'll go in with his combinations. He doesn't have insane knockout power, but he does have some good knockout power. I don't want to say he's pillow-fisted. I don't want to say he's really, really powerful. He's probably somewhere in between, but he's got very good volume, very good cardio, like I said. I've seen this guy stuff takedowns without even having to sprawl them. He's very, very strong. He's looking more shredded than ever on the scales as well. I really do like that. I got him at like minus 157. Threw a little bit of something on him. I do feel fairly good about him. I know there's a lot of people on Dan Argueta's side, but I do think that I've seen enough from Jean Matsumoto to know that this guy is going to be there, ready to sprawl the takedowns, and he's got a very strong sprawl. He's got a very solid sprawl. He's defended single legs pretty well, and I do think that if Dan Argueta starts training together takedowns, that does concern me a little bit. But I think that this fight will be on the feet enough for Jean Matsumoto to do enough on the feet to find success. And on the Contender Series, when he was taken down, he found his way back up to the feet both times, I want to say, in under a minute. And he's very calm. And like I said, BJJ black belt, so he probably has the better jiu-jitsu game here. What I do get concerned about is I saw in his most recent fight on the regional scene, so prior to the Dana White's Contender Series, he jumped guillotine twice. Now, I think I want to say he won by guillotine, so he's obviously got a good guillotine, but I never really like it when fighters are committing to a guillotine, especially against a good grappler and Dan Argueta. So, yeah, Dan Argueta will chain together takedowns, shoot a lot of takedowns. If he gets them, he can win, but I do think that even if he does get them, and I think he will get some, he could still lose his fight, where Jean Matsumoto is getting back up to the feet at times. He is much quicker. I would say he's much more athletic too. Just clearly the much better striker. I don't think the wrestling differential is that big to where I would want to pick Dan Argueta. And like I said, I know some UFC debuts do go bad, but Jean Matsumoto has all the tools to figure it out by the end of the fight, because some of these UFC debuts that go really bad are the guys with not such great cardio and that don't really improve as the fight goes on. I'd say Jean Matsumoto is the guy that will improve as the fight goes on. He might kind of warm into the whole way the fight is playing out. And I just think that he's going to have a pure camp stressed around stuffing takedowns, and he has already shown some decent takedown defense from what I've seen. And like I said, he's pretty decent at getting back up to his feet as well. He's the better fighter. He can lose because Dan Argueta is one-dimensional, good at that one dimension. But I'm going to go John Matsumoto. I'll say 30-27. I think he makes it look pretty well. He's like -160 now. I don't mind playing it. I don't mind throwing that in a parlay, but if you think Dan Argueta is going to bring problems to him, probably don't play it yourself. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Pedro Falcao versus Victor Hugo. I don't have an official pick for this right now. I'll have my pick out by the time the card starts tomorrow in my pinned comment down below. I did a little bit of research on Pedro Falcao. He's got good grappling. He'll spam takedowns. He's a BJJ black belt, so that is something to note because Victor Hugo does get taken down. And on the Contender Series, I want to say he was taken down, controlled for some period of time, but he's got a very good submission game. He seems to be pretty decent at getting back up to the feet, but Pedro Falcao has the better cardio here. Victor Hugo does slow down, and if Pedro just spams takedowns early, and Victor Hugo isn't really being able to find the submissions that he wants to because Pedro is well-versed in his submission game, he can just go out there and he can just control Victor Hugo for 3 rounds, potentially bully him into a submission. I don't really see that happening, but who knows? I think people are overrating Victor Hugo slightly. Like, I think his striking isn't as good as people see. In this matchup, he's the better, more dangerous striker. There's no doubt in my mind about that. He has, I want to say probably has a better submission game from what I have seen. Like, Pedro Falcao sure is a black belt, but I haven't really seen him use it the way that I would want to see him use it. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm not going to give you my official prediction here because I want to do a little bit more tape study on Victor Hugo. I watched a recent boxing match of Pedro Falcao, and he actually showed much improved head movement. And in the past, I haven't been very high on his striking. He's won the Dana White's Contender Series before, but was not signed because of his boring performance. But yeah, I mean, expect this guy to spam takedowns. If Victor Hugo can stuff him, he's probably winning this fight. At the same time, he does slow down, and Pedro has the better cardio, so I'm heavily considering Pedro. He's only +110. And that kind of does concern me on the Victor Hugo side because I see so many people picking Victor Hugo, yet Pedro Falcao is sitting there at +110. So I'm very heavily considering Pedro Falcao. I might end up picking him. Like I said, check the pinned comment down below. But I kind of hope Victor Hugo wins because if he wins, it's going to be a lot more entertaining than Pedro Falcao. So let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Norma Dumont versus Germaine de Randemie. Germaine de Randemie is the better striker here, but she is coming off a 3.5 or 4-year-long layoff where she had a kid, whatnot, and she recently just beat Juliana Pena, which is a very solid win to have. But we look at Norma Dumont here. Very strong and fairly physically imposing lady. It's just an interesting fight to me because now we have Norma Dumont cutting down from the 145-pound division, but she actually looks strong on the scales, and it feels like every single fighter moving down a weight class this year is just having a lot of success. A pretty solid example of this is Ihor Potieria, the guy that didn't have good cardio at the light heavyweight division, cut down to middleweight on short notice and went 3 solid rounds with solid output and had the best performance of his career. Chidi Njokuani, he just went 3 solid rounds, and he's always gassed out in the first round as well. He moved down from 185 to 170. The reason why Chidi Njokuani's voice is the way that it is because he cut too much weight back in the day. So it's interesting how that works out. So I'm going to continue that trend here. I'm going with Norma Dumont. She is the younger fighter. I always thought that she could make bantamweight, even though she's fought her last 4 fights at featherweight. That is concerning. It's just I look at Germaine de Randemie, and I understand she is the much better striker, and she is one of the few women's MMA fighters that have actually impressed me. She is fun to watch, but she is 39 years old, coming off a long layoff, and I know that with these bigger weight classes, more so we say this with the light heavyweight division and the heavyweight division, but for women's MMA, it's kind of the bantamweight division. Bantamweight, right? Yeah, the bantamweight division. The bigger girls, it's just not as necessary for this ring rust type of thing because they're just slow as fuck, and you can find your timing a little bit better. Anyway, a lot of people in the community are probably throwing this around for all these fights with long layoffs, with women's bantamweight and just light heavyweight, even maybe middleweight. I'll say more heavyweight, because even light heavyweight, like there's some serious power there. Heavyweight, it can be very sloppy. You can just survive Derek Lewis for a couple of minutes. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is Germaine de Randemie can really work her way into this fight. I don't think it's going to happen. And the reason why I say that is just because Norma Dumont is younger and she is improving, and I think she's going to work towards the takedowns, and if not, she's going to chill in the clinch. And we have seen Germaine de Randemie struggle in the clinch before. Yeah, sure, she beat Raquel Pennington, and that is a very good win to have. But that was like 7 years ago. Maybe that wasn't that long ago, but that was like 5 to 7 years ago against Holly Holm. Holly Holm won a fair bit of rounds just by controlling her in the clinch. Holly Holm failed every takedown but won fights in the clinch. Norma Dumont is stronger than all these girls, and I think that when it comes to her takedowns, she goes for trips, and trips are what had success against Germaine de Randemie against Juliana Pena. Now, this is probably my lowest confident pick on the entire card. The reason why this prediction video came out so late is because I did way too much research on this damn fight, And I'm still indecisive about it, but I'm going to pick Norma Dumont because I don't want to pick an old, washed-up fighter. I would lose my mind if Germaine goes out there and looks even slower than she already does. And that's what I will say, too, is Germaine, in the first place, isn't really the most fast fighter. She is good at maintaining range, and I actually really do love her fighting from range. And I will also say this much. Norma Dumont struggled with the range of Macy Chiasson. And that concerns me. Macy Chiasson had kind of a kickboxing style, but Macy Chiasson also had a takedown threat, so that is something to note. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do MMA math here too, where I'm like, well, Norma Dumont beat this girl, and then this girl beat this girl, and then you look at like Carol Rosa. Oh, Carol Rosa just went to war with Irene Aldana, and Irene Aldana just beat Macy Chiasson, and then you look at all these different fights where you're trying to like MMA math your way to the top of the bantamweight division. It just doesn't make sense. And women's MMA, I mean, maybe styles make matchups, obviously, but women's MMA is a little bit unpredictable at times. Sometimes they show up and they're just not a good fighter whatsoever. Anyways, I'm going to stop bitching about that. I think Norma Dumont can find takedowns. I think the reason why is because she's strong in the clinch. Not only is she strong in the clinch, we have seen Germaine survive in the clinch before, but she is strong enough, just in general, to find the takedowns that some of these other girls haven't had. And I know that she beat Chelsea Chandler, and Chelsea Chandler looked horrible against Josiane Nunes, but she got the job done, and she showed some offensive grappling to her credit there. Fuck, man. I'm not really that excited for this fight, but like Norma's strong. She is a strong girl. She's got some decent boxing. If this is a pure striking fight and Germaine can stuff the takedowns and nullify the clinch, she clearly wins this fight in my opinion, but there's a solid chance that she shows out there looking washed, looking slower than ever. And Norma Dumont is making improvements and landing big shots. I wasn't impressed by Norma Dumont's performance against Carol Rosa. I didn't like her performance against Macy Chiasson. She did get taken down 6 times, but I still think she has solid enough takedowns to get them in this fight. I like her cardio. Moving down to 135, like I said, people that are moving down weight classes in 2024 are having success. I don't know. I kind of want to go with Germaine because she is the underdog, but I'm not going to be underdog horny here. I'm going to put my bias aside because I started out on the Germaine side. And I do have a lot of respect for her beating everybody but Amanda Nunes. But for some reason, I'm getting the vibe that Norma Dumont's going to make this one very boring. We're going to be in a lot of clinch situations, and then she's going to get a couple of trips. And once Germaine is down off of her back, she doesn't have the greatest scrambles. And I think Norma will be able to control her probably for at least 2 of the rounds. I'm going to say the first 2 rounds, I think this will be a close decision. And I'm going to go with Norma Dumont 29-28. Maybe a split decision, maybe not. We'll see. I don't fucking know. I don't know. Germaine's just hard to trust. And if Germaine of old shows up, she does win this fight. But like I said, I mean, there's certain factors that I think I trust the strong, beefy Norma Dumont to win. So let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Court McGee versus Alex Morono. I'm going with Alex Morono here. Court McGee, I mean, he's actually pretty decent everywhere. I mean, he's got some good grappling, but his grappling is not as good as Alex Morono, who has very high-level jiu-jitsu. Sure, Court McGee could probably get this fight down to the ground, might have the wrestling advantage. Alex Morono has decent wrestling, maybe not the greatest takedown defense, but I think for the most part this will be a stand-up matchup, and in this stand-up on the feet, I think Alex Morono is the better striker. He has pretty solid cardio. He's got some decent power, but he likes to stand and bang, and I picked him against Joaquin Buckley for this reason. He's a guy that I have liked in the past. I got that fight wrong. I learned from my mistakes, and then I picked Joaquin Buckley last weekend against Vicente Luque. Now, that fight looked very weird, but I got a right prediction, so I'm a little bit proud about that. Now, I will say this. The loss to Joaquin Buckley doesn't look that bad, but in the past, now that I'm kind of looking back at it, I'm not super impressed with Alex Morono's resume, and I am kind of worried about him here. He is kind of a hard guy to predict. I've underrated him before, and then I've overrated him. I've gone through the same cycle with many fighters. Chris Curtis is one of those guys. I'm worried about the main event for that damn reason. So, Alex Morono. He's got pretty solid cardio. Maybe not the greatest, but he's got pretty solid cardio. He can get hit. Court McGee does have some degree of power where he could potentially make something happen here. But I do trust Alex Morono on the feet. I think he's got good volume. I think he will sit down on his shots. Court McGee's been knocked out multiple times. I can't trust the chin of Court McGee. And for that reason, I'm picking Alex Morono. And I think he can find a KO. I'm going to say like round 2. I think Court McGee gets hit enough to where Alex Morono is going to really go after this guy. And if there is grappling involved, I'm going to favor the very high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner in Alex Morono. Even though he just did not look good in his last performance against Joaquin Buckley, he still had success against Joaquin Buckley, who is now a top 15 ranked welterweight, which feels really weird to say. Really weird to say. But yeah, Alex Morono should be the better striker. This should be a primarily striking fight. And if it's not, like I said, good submission game from Alex Morono. But I mean, yeah, he's unreliable. He is unreliable and hard to predict for me. But this is a fight where I'm picking Alex Morono, round 2 KO. Moving on to the next fight of the card, which is Trevor Peek versus Charlie Campbell. Damn it, I was hoping this fight wasn't that early because I have no clue where I'm going with this. I'm just going to talk about these guys. Charlie Campbell, He's got pretty quick hands. He's got the quicker hands of the matchup. He's the more rangy guy in this matchup. He trains with Cerro Longo. He is a BJJ blue belt, and I don't think he's that good of a grappler. I've watched a lot of his tape just to try and see where I'm going to go with this fight. And I didn't see him working any takedowns. He's not really working takedowns. It's not that he's uncomfortable there. He's actually had some recent grappling, not fights, but you know what I'm saying, grappling matchups. He's taken on some grappling fights, some grappling, whatever the fuck it's called. What do you call a grappling match? There you go. He's taken on some grappling matches recently. And I kind of like to see that. He's working in his grappling. I don't think he's going to shoot takedowns here. I doubt that's going to be the case. And if he does, he's probably going to be hurt. And the thing about Trevor Peek, the weird thing about him is, you know, you can take him down, and unless you're a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner, which Charlie Campbell has not been proven to be, you're not really holding down Trevor Peek. Despite how weird his get-up game can be, he gets up, and then it will be on the feet. And on the feet, that's where he takes big shots and lands big shots of his own. I want to go with Trevor Peek. I'm a big fan of Trevor Peek, and I'm trying to put my bias aside because I also don't like Charlie Campbell. But last week, there was a fight that I broke down that I felt like was very similar to this one. There was Nate Landwehr versus Jamal Emmers. Not the exact same, but there was a guy that I said, if he can make this a dog fight and he can trade in the pocket with this guy and really put the pressure on Jamal Emmers, he would win this fight. And he won that fight based off of doing that. And he got dropped early, but he recovered. Jamal Emmers was hunting for that KO, and he came back and he found that knockout. Now, I do trust Nate Landwehr's cardio a little bit more than Trevor Peek's here. Now, Trevor Peek arguably has a better chin than Nate Landwehr, but Nate Landwehr might even have the more overpowered chin because he has that type of chin where he'll get knocked down, forces opponents to really hunt for the finish, and that forces them to blow their load, and then he comes back and beats them in the later rounds. Not always the case because sometimes it's the end of round one against Jamal Emmers, as we saw then. But essentially, I picked Jamal Emmers. I said he was the more technical striker, but he can get chinned here. He can get submitted if he gets sloppy in the later rounds, and if he is hunting for the finish, that will happen. And based off of, I would say, 10 seconds after he dropped Nate Landwehr, maybe that first combination, the way he was hunting for that KO, I knew Nate Landwehr was going to win that fight if Jamal Emmers did not find that KO in the next minute or two, because Jamal was hunting for that KO. There was blood in the water, and Nate was looking good, and he was pepping in his step. I meant to say he got some pep in his step even after he got knocked down. That's how Nate Landwehr fights, and Trevor Peek can be that same guy, and he gets hit, but he'll crack back. And that's why I am so concerned about this fight, because even when it doesn't make sense for Trevor Peek to win fights, he wins them. He does. In his UFC debut, he beat Eric Gonzalez. He got taken down like 3, maybe 4 times, and then eventually the fight was on the feet towards the end of the round. He landed the bigger shot, and then Eric Gonzalez went down and got KO'd. He's got these weird tomahawk punches. He throws punches from weird angles. He's one of the most sloppy fighters you'll ever see. I think he's only been training MMA for 6 years now. To tell you the type of person that Trevor Peek is, he fought his first 2 fights without a coach, and I think he won both by KO. I could be wrong. Was it his first pro? I think they might have even been pro fights. It could have been amateur. I just heard an interview very recently. Trevor Peek, in his words, is born to fight. He's got a good chin. He's got good power. He can take punishment. He's not got the greatest grappling, but he will shoot takedowns, and he got some takedowns against Muhammad Yahya, but I think Yahya freaking sucks. Now, before that, he lost to Chepe Mariscal, who was fighting later on in this card. And I'm a big Chepe fan. I did pick Trevor Peek there because I wasn't so sure on how I felt about Chepe Mariscal. And Chepe Mariscal is a featherweight, and he took the fight on short notice up a weight class, and Trevor Peek was not able to beat him. And Chepe made it look very, very easily. Now, I think part of that is because Chepe Mariscal is very good. And I'll talk about that fight later on versus Morgan Charriere. That's actually a very, very interesting fight. Really excited for that fight. That fight and this fight are probably my 2 favorite fights on this card. Just very interested. I'm a big fan of Trevor Peek and Chepe Mariscal. And very interested in Morgan Charriere as well. Anyways, I don't need to be talking about that fight. I need to be talking about this fight. I don't know who's going to win this fight. I'm going to be honest with you, because Charlie Campbell does not have the greatest chin, I don't think. Sure, he got knocked out by Chris Duncan, but in all fairness, he crashed in and got KO'd by Chris Duncan, who has KO guys on the regional scene. He has some sort of power, but recently I don't really view Chris Duncan as this KO guy, because he's going out there and he's grappling and he's holding guys up against the cage and he's making it a boring fight and he's not trading in the pocket. And I don't view him as that KO guy, but I can kind of see on the regional scene, obviously he does have some KO. So maybe it's not that bad of a loss as I thought. But then he goes out there and Charlie Campbell doesn't face adversity. And when adversity has hit him, the only time in his career, from what I have watched, I watched like 6 fights on this guy just to try and get a read, Chris Duncan flatlined him. Maybe not flatlined him, but you saw how that went out, where he hurt Chris Duncan, got overexcited, and then got caught. And this could be the exact same case here, because people said, oh, well, he was very, he was very cautious against Alex Reyes. which was true. He was more cautious than he was against Chris Duncan, but even then I felt like he was still getting a little bit excited. He was still going for the finish a little bit, and he held back at times, but I still felt like there was times where he was trading in the pocket, where if he's doing that against Trevor Peek, Trevor Peek's putting the guy out. I don't know, because here's the thing. I've seen Trevor Peek go 3 rounds, but he kind of slows down a little bit. He's not going at a fast pace like I compared Nate Landwehr to. And the other reason why I wanted to compare those 2 fights, and I'll just briefly say this, is because I'm a big fan of Nate Landwehr too. And I said if I pick Nate Landwehr, I'd feel like I'm being biased. And he was my official read for a second, and then I'm like, all right, I'm just being biased. Let me go with Jamal Emmers. He's a more technical fighter. I can't go with Nate Landwehr just because he's a dog. Like, Jamal is a better fighter. He's been 3 rounds before. But then you see these dogs that push insane paces in the first round, tire out these guys that have been 3 rounds at a nice, good old-fashioned technical pace. Now, Charlie Campbell's never been 3 rounds at a good old-fashioned technical pace. And the one time he did, it was actually against a pretty decent opponent. I'd say probably the second best opponent he's faced outside of Chris Duncan. Maybe Alex Reyes too, because he's in the UFC. There's a guy that he faced when he was 2-0. The guy's now like 7-2 or something like that. Seems like a decent fighter. But even then, when I watched the guy, I wasn't extremely impressed by him. But I mean, obviously that was a while ago. But it reached round 2 and 3, and like Charlie Campbell, he didn't completely drop off a cliff, but he was slowing down. He did look a little bit more sloppy than normal. And I think he would be a lot more tired in rounds 2 and rounds 3 if that was against Trevor Peek. I just don't feel like I could be picking Trevor Peek because I feel biased if I pick the guy. But if he wins, then I'm just going to feel like I made the same damn mistake where I didn't trust the dog. And it's just like sometimes you got to trust the gritty dogs to get it done. Some fights where Trevor Peek impressed me. I mean, he beat Kamaworthy on the regional scene. There was another guy that was 7-0. He slumped the guy in the first 30 seconds. But he can get hurt. Against Malik Lewis on the Contender Series, he was getting touched up. He was getting rocked all over the place, and then he comes back after losing the fight for a large part of the time, lands a knee, Malik Lewis goes down, and then he finishes the fight. When he hurts people, he puts them in bad places and can finish them. Against Muhammad Yahya, he hurt him in the first minute of that fight. Couldn't finish him. I didn't like how he fought against Muhammad Yahya. If that version of Trevor Peek shows up, he loses. If he makes this a dogfight and they are trading in the pocket, I'm going to favor Trevor Peek. Does it happen? I don't know. I'm kind of delaying my pick here. I just need time to think about this shit. But like Charlie Campbell's chin is not something I can trust. Do I go with Trevor Peek? Am I being biased if I pick Trevor Peek here? I kind of think so. I kind of honestly think so. He lost to Chepe Mariscal, who, to be entirely honest, like Chepe Mariscal is good, and you'll see where I'm picking that fight later. Fuck, man. I think I'm going with Charlie Campbell. And I think he'd get it done by decision. But that's the thing. I feel like he gets outdogged if the fight goes later. And if he doesn't get this finish in round 1 and doesn't have a strong round 2 and he doesn't win round 2, I don't think he's winning round 3. I think Trevor Peek will be more gained as the fight goes on. But at the same time, I see Trevor Peek getting cracked. But I also see Trevor Peek pushing Charlie Campbell and putting him on the back foot where he has rarely been in his career. And that's where Charlie Campbell can get slept. Do I want to have fun here? I'm so torn on this pick. Give me the freaking dog. We're going with Trevor Peek. I'm sorry. I never make picks this dramatic. I'm sorry, man. I think I'm going with Trevor Peek, bro. Oh, man. I'm going with Trevor Peek. He's been decisions lately. I hated the performance against Muhammad Yahya, but Charlie Campbell, I'm sorry, just the way he throws punches sometimes, it looks a little bit stiff to me. His head movement doesn't look that good. Trevor Peek, baby. If you think Charlie Campbell wins this fight, by all means pick him. By all means, go for that side. It's just, since Nate Landwehr happened last week, I got to do myself a favor and pick Trevor Peek here. I'm not being biased. Trevor Peek can make this a dogfight, and in a dogfight, I think they trade in the pocket, and Trevor Peek can't clip him. So let's move on. I'll say round 2 or 3 KO, if not win by decision. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Valter Walker versus Lukasz Brzeski. In this matchup, I'm going with Valter Walker, even though I don't think he's good. I know some people are like, oh, he's the next up-and-coming heavyweight prospect. Look, his striking is bad. He is slow. He is plotty. I don't think his takedown entries are that good. It took him 4 rounds to finish Alex Nicholson. That's concerning to me. But Lukasz Brzeski was taken down so many times by Carl Williams. Now, he did get up multiple times, and if he does play that game where he can get back up multiple times, keep this fight on the feet for a fair amount of this fight, he is the better striker. He probably has the better cardio. He seems to be in better shape than he was before on his Instagram. On the weigh-ins, I actually don't really remember it, but I think he looked in slightly better shape than he was before. And if he is on that secret juice again, secret sauce, that's where he can win this fight looking like a new version of himself. I'm picking Valter Walker. I think he can find the takedowns. He's been more committed to the takedowns recently in his career, whereas back in the day, not back in the day, but I was watching some of his earlier fights on in his career, and he was entertaining the striking too much for my liking. I think there's a clear better striker here, but at the same time, since Valter Walker has that takedown threat, he can have success with the striking. Valter Walker, you know who this guy looks like? It's that weird-looking heavyweight fighter that just lost to Cyril Gane. Sergey Spivak. Yeah, he looks like Sergey Spivak mixed with Ihor Potieria, mixed with something else, man. I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, he's got good takedowns. Decent power. I don't think his power is that good. I don't think he's slumping Brzeski on the feet. But Brzeski, I mean, did he just get KO'd in his last 2 fights? No, last fight he got KO'd by Waldo Cortez Acosta. And then his most recent fight against Carl Williams, he got dropped, which isn't a good sign. But he did beat Martin Buday. And Martin Buday, like, say what you want to, he's a mid-heavyweight outside of the rankings. He's a mid-heavyweight. I know he lost to Shamil Gaziev, but is Shamil Gaziev that bad of a heavyweight? I mean, he's a meme for that Jairzinho Rosenstruik performance. I picked Jairzinho because I knew who Shamil Gaziev was, but Shamil is a guy that beats a majority of heavyweights outside of the rankings. And I'd say probably the same for Martin Buday. Maybe not, but we're going to go with Valter Walker. I think he gets this one by decision. I think he's going to find the takedowns. Brzeski's going to be working to get back up to the feet. He's going to stay active. And Valter might land some TKO. It might come close to a near stoppage at times. I think it somehow makes it to a decision and Valter Walker doesn't put on this insane performance that everyone is saying. Very possible too, though, because he's at 265 pounds and he does have muscle on him. And Lukasz Brzeski, he might be 240 pounds and he is undersized and he doesn't have the greatest cardio. It's kind of interesting to note. But Valter Walker will be the pick. Confidence is not enough to lay anything on Valter Walker as a favorite. Maybe if he was minus 120, I might throw $5 on the guy. I just don't think he's that good. I really think there is a difference in the striking. I could be completely wrong. Like I said, he is big, and I think when I saw them face off, he was so much bigger. So with that, I'm okay. Maybe not minus 120. I would throw a little bit of money on him at minus 120, but he should win this fight. If he sticks to his game plan of finding takedowns, he should be strong enough to find the takedowns, even if the entries suck, right? He's a guy that's strong enough to just pull out the legs from under Lukasz Brzeski. And on top, he's going to be better at controlling Lukasz Brzeski probably than Carl Williams because he weighs so much more. And Carl Williams, the dude's like a BJJ blue belt maybe. He started training BJJ like 2-3 years. I don't know. I heard something about it, and he's not a good jiu-jitsu guy, I'll say that much. He's not very good with the submission game. He's Mr. Decisionator himself. So I'm going to go with Valter Walker because I think he finds takedowns. And if he finds takedowns, it's a 265-pound man on top of the flabby man, Lukasz Brzeski. So let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Ignacio Bahamondes versus Christos Giagos. I think Christos Giagos has a solid chance to clip Ignacio Bahamondes early. He hurt Daniel Zellhuber early, but I think Ignacio should win this. Ignacio, I think, will be a little more technical, really try to keep this one more at range than I see Daniel Zellhuber. I feel like they're actually kind of similar. Maybe not the exact same, but Daniel Zellhuber and Ignacio Bahamondes are pretty comparable. I used to think that, Daniel Zellhuber wasn't that good and maybe not as good as Ignacio. After his recent 2 performances, I put him above Ignacio Bahamondes, and I don't think Ignacio Bahamondes is that good. But also, he just lost to Ludovic Klein, who I think is a pretty solid fighter. So I'm going to watch this fight and let that stand for itself. I think Ignacio can find a finish here because Christos does slow down. So I'll say a round 3 TKO or sub. And I'm going to go with a sub because I'm feeling spicy. I think we're going to get one of those scenarios where he hurts him on the feet, Christos maybe shoots in on a bad takedown, or Bahamondes gets the back. So we'll say a round 3 sub. I'll go with the front choke. We'll go with the Darce choke. Fuck yeah. But round 3 submission. I think Christos Giagos is going to slow down. Ignacio is going to keep it very technical early on the fight, not really entertain many of these pocket exchanges. He's going to be aware of Christos Giagos' overhand right, some of these other looping hooks. He's got power. Like, I'll give Christos Giagos that, but he is a very finishable guy. He's been KO'd multiple times. He's been submitted multiple times. Now, though I don't think Ignacio is that good, he's got good cardio. He's obviously really, really rangy, and it probably is going to be tougher Christos Giagos to close the distance. And I actually do like Ignacio Bahamondes' win against Trey Ogden. That's aged pretty damn well. Trey Ogden is a very tricky fighter for a lot of fighters in this division. So, lightweight division. Ignacio Bahamondes keeps it technical, keeps it at range, stays away from the power of Christos Giagos. Giagos slowly starts to slow down. I'll say round 1 will be the closest round, and Bahamondes can get clipped, although he hasn't shown a trash chin. I kind of look at him, and it looks like he'd be a chinny type of guy. Now, I've been wrong with that before. The last time I did say that was Fernando Padilla, and he beat Luis Pajelo. took some good shots, and he actually seems like a guy with a pretty solid chin. But you know what I'm saying? Like these kind of guys that are very skinny, got the smaller necks, they kind of seem like they'd have a bad chin, and Christos Giagos does have good power. But I'm not just going to pick against Ignacio Bahomondes because I feel like he's a bad chin based off of the way that he looks. Yeah, man. Rangy striker. He'll probably play this technical, really try to lock in since he lost his last fight. And he's younger. He'll be making the improvements. Round 3, submission after hurting Christos Giagos on the feet. This also could go to decision, or Giagos could potentially find a finish. So yeah, let's move on to the next fight of the card. Chepe Mariscal versus Morgan Charriere. Yeah. I love Chepe Mariscal. In this match, I'm going with Morgan Charriere. And I'm kind of mad at myself for doing it because I wanted to be the guy, Chepe all the way. I've been the guy that's picked Chepe, not against Trevor Peek, but after that I picked him against Jack Jenkins. His regional career, I mean, it's been fun to watch. I rewatched some of the tape. He's had his ups and downs for sure, but for the most part, he's a fun guy to watch. The fight against Trevor Peek made me a big fan of him. I was already a fan of Trevor Peek going into there, and then after that, I'm like, all right, this Chepe dude is so much fun to watch. He took this up a weight class on short notice and put on an absolute scrap of a fight. I was kind of mad it wasn't fight of the night. Emmett versus Topuria got it over him, and that was a fun fight, sure, but it was a beatdown. Just give Topuria like a performance bonus, like he's the main event. Like Chepe Mariscal took this on short notice, give him a little bit of love. Like in Trevor Peek, obviously put on a fun performance, but I'm going with Morgan Charriere, and the reason with it is I don't think Chepe Mariscal is that good off the back foot. I think he's decent, and sure he had good moments off the back foot against Trevor Peek where he was dodging punches, but his offense off the back foot isn't that good. I don't like his counters that good unless he's trading in the pocket, and I think when you're getting pressured against Morgan Charriere, that's where he can find good counters. And I think the reason why Morgan is going to be able to counter him, maybe not counter him, he's going to be able to pressure him, is because his head movement is really good. But it's not like he's ducking out of the way and then backing up. It's like kind of Ilia Topuria-esque. And he's not Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is much better, believe me. I know that. But what I'm trying to say is Ilia is very good at slipping off the center line, looking for counters at times, some nice pull counters as well. But what I'm trying to get at is when he ducks out of the way of punches, he does it pretty well without giving much ground because there's always a threat of his counters. And Morgan Charriere, to a certain degree, is pretty similar because he'll slip out, have a couple of nice pull counters, have a couple of nice check hook counter, whatever it might be. He's some decent counters with his head movement. He's got very solid head movement. He has got caught, I want to say a couple of times. I want to say Paul Hughes was a guy that caught him, but he recovered pretty well. He has a good chin. Never been finished from what I know. Maybe he's been submitted. I don't think he's been finished, though. I think he lost 2 decisions. Submitted 1 time, I want to say. I'm going to pull that up just to make sure. I think it's 1 time he's been submitted. But anyways, he hasn't lost a fight in a while. The last time he lost a fight was 2021, which I know doesn't seem that long ago, but he lost to Paul Hughes. And then before that, he lost to Jordan Fucenic. Both of those fights were very competitive. And honestly, like, those are very good opponents. Prior to those two opponents, his last fight was last loss was in 2019. I'm not speaking well right now. Just bear with me. What Morgan Charriere is very good at doing, he's good with the pull counters. He's good with his head movement. And I think Chepe is going to have a hard time finding him. Chepe struggled with the body kicks of Jack Jenkins. And I have a take about that fight that not many people are going to agree with. I picked Chepe there because I thought he'd deal with the leg kicks better than he did. But I did think that in round 2, his game plan completely changed. And with that game plan for the rest of the fight, I thought he would have won that fight. And that's being completely honest. In round 1, he went out there, he fought at range with Jack Jenkins, and he got outclassed. And Jack Jenkins is a good fighter and technical from range. But I was expecting Chepe to kind of go in there, trade in the pocket, get some grappling going for himself. Kind of similar to what he did in round 2. He traded a little bit in the pocket, but mainly he just said, all right, my striking's not working so much. Even when I went in the pocket in round 1, Jack found some success. I don't have as big of an advantage in the pocket as I thought it did. So he went and he started shooting takedowns, got into the clinch, and then he also found that nice judo throw where Jack Jenkins dislocated his arm. But you can't tell me Chepe was losing that fight in the second round. He was pretty clearly winning it. He was having success on the feet, maybe not so much success. He wasn't beating the brakes off of Jack Jenkins, but he had success on the feet. And then he shot takedowns, and then it was into the clinch. He had some damage within the clinch. And then within the clinch, he held down Jack Jenkins very well. It wasn't like Jack Jenkins was just chilling in there. He was trying to separate, but he couldn't because Chepe was strong. Chepe shot takedowns. He didn't really get all of them. I understand that, but then he finally got that judo throw. And yes, Jack Jenkins did have a whizzer, so he probably would have got back up, but I don't think he would have separated. I think from that position forward, Chepe would have gone in for the clinch. And if his whole goal was to win that fight with the clinch, shooting takedowns and the grappling, I think he probably could have gone on to win that fight. Now, when it comes to the striking, I do think that the guy he was facing, Jack Jenkins, in a pure striking fight is the better striker. I will say that much. I'll admit defeat there. I thought Chepe, since he trained with whatever his freaking name is, the guy that is fighting Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje. I can talk about a whole fight night card, but I can't remember Justin Gaethje's name. What the hell? But, I mean, he trains with Justin Gaethje. Great low kicks. I thought a fairly similar style to Jack Jenkins, so he'd be able to deal with them better than he did, but he got touched up with the low kicks. I'll admit defeat there, but like I said, Chepe shot takedowns. I thought if he stayed to that game plan that he was going for the first 3.5 minutes up until that, that weird arm fluke injury, he could have won that fight. And that's a hot take because everyone's saying, well, Jack Jenkins was piecing him up, and they're acting like 3.5 minutes of Chepe Mariscal winning round 2 didn't just happen. And Chepe's got good cardio. It's not like he's going to fade. Anyways, where I was going with that. Chepe's best takedowns are with his judo throws. He's a judo black belt, but guess who is also a judo black belt? Morgan Charriere. And that is not something that I like to see. It just is not. And I like Chepe, but I think that where he's going to have problems is when he misses on a punch, maybe overextend, and Morgan Charriere is going to have a couple of pull back counters, catch him with some straight shots. I love the straight punches from Morgan Charriere. Got good, nice, straight punches. That's all I'm trying to say. Jeez, I can't get my words out for this fight, but he's decent in the pocket too. Like, not only does he have very good power, and Chepe has been finished multiple times in the regional scene. Against Joannis and Brito, he got caught massively. But I like the body kicks from Morgan Charriere. Like I said, Jack Jenkins landed some nice body kicks, snuck him in there very well against Chepe. And Chepe can get controlled. He can find takedowns, and Morgan can get taken down, and he can get controlled, but that's only against pretty high-level opponents. And Chepe might be that guy, and he is pretty high-level, and this is kind of that part where there are holes in both these guys' games. It just kind of depends on how the fight is going to go. Maybe it's whoever finds the first takedown, shoots the first takedown, will have success with the grappling, because I think Chepe can get controlled from on top, and same thing with Morgan, but they both have good scrambles back up to the feet. Morgan has been 5 rounds multiple times. I want to say Chepe might have as well, because he's fought in some main events, but I also think that might not be the case. Chepe's got good cardio is the point. He's got good 3 rounds of cardio. Both these guys do. This could be a very fun fight, but I actually think there's going to be a fair bit amount of clinching, because that's what Morgan will do. He'll pressure you, and then when he sees something he doesn't like, he'll get you up in the clinch, kind of slow the fight down, and that's kind of a weapon he does use a little bit, and I really don't like that, and Morgan can be boring at times, but I do think recently he's been a lot of fun to watch, and that performance at UFC Paris against that freaking fighter I can't even name because it was not a good fighter, but it was a very fun performance, and I think he's got probably the power advantage here just because his chin is good. Submission game, they're both BJJ purple belts. Something to note is Chepe is a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I'm not really well-versed in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you know the difference, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, but if not, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't really know the difference. I'm going to assume he's got a decent submission game, because I have seen a decent submission game, and I've seen some nice takedowns. I've seen some nice throws. I think that's the best part of his offensive grappling, like I have said, from Chepe Mariscal, but I think Morgan Charriere is going to deal with it pretty well, considering he's a judo black belt. I like his counter-striking game. Counter-strike is not a thing you see very well from a lot of fighters, and good straight punches, good body kicks. He can float around. I mean, he can fight off the back foot too. I just think with the way that he kind of pull counters, the way that he has threats with his counter-striking, and just the way that he kind of refuses to give up ground and slowly kind of works forward with his pressure, will lead him to win this fight. I'm going to say by decision, but if Chepe can go out there, make this a dogfight, go out there and pressure Morgan Charriere, this is where he can win the fight. But I can't trust Chepe's chin too much. I can't trust it too much because Morgan does have very, very solid power, but it's not like every single strike Morgan lands is going to knock everyone out. So, low confidence pick, very low confidence pick. I kind of don't know how I feel about Chepe Mariscal and Trevor Peek, because we're kind of seeing how their careers unravel, because although I said Chepe Mariscal could have ended up beating Jack Jenkins, and I thought that would have been the case had he stuck to that game plan, I can't really tell you for sure. And he was getting touched up on the feet, and against Trevor Peek, that was a striking fight for the most part, and obviously Chepe Mariscal won that fight, but I do think Trevor Peek does have a style that can beat Charlie Campbell. It's weird. Okay, so last thing I'll say about the Morgan Charriere fight. Like, he's got some decent takedowns of his own. He will work in the clinch, and he can scramble back up to the feet, but when he is tired out and after he does get clipped, that's where he will chill out on bottom, and I think Chepe can find success on top, and he is probably a little bit more well-rounded. Obviously, he has the college wrestling accolades. I want to say he was the junior college national something like qualifier, semifinals qualifier. Jeez, man. He was on the national kickboxing team for America. He was on the kickboxing national team. he has experience in a lot of different martial arts, a lot of different combat sports. I just don't think he's going to be able to pressure Morgan Charriere because of his counters and because of his head movement, and that's going to lead Morgan Charriere to just standing his ground, slowly working forward, working in the clinch too. He can have success in the clinch, so we'll see how this one goes. I'm cheering for Chepe. I really hope he gets it done. Like I said, this is a low-confidence pick, but I'm going to have to go with Morgan Charriere because if I'm going with Chepe, once again, that might be a little bit biased on my side. I went in there thinking I was going to predict Chepe too, but Morgan did impress me a little bit. He did impress me a little bit, even though he hasn't taken on the greatest competition on the regional scene, and when he has lost the high levels of competition on the regional scene, but he made those fights competitive, and I think he has improved since then. So that's my reason for picking Morgan Charriere. He's younger. He will be improving. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Alexander Hernandez versus Damon Jackson in this matchup. I am taking Alexander Hernandez. I think Damon Jackson isn't that good. He's very hittable on the feet. A large reason why I picked Yusuf Zalal against Billy Gorantillo is because I saw Billy Gorantillo getting touched up a little bit too much by Damon Jackson, allowing too much success with the grappling for Damon Jackson. And I just don't think Damon Jackson is that good, and he's not really meant to take punishment. I mean, that KO against Dan Ige was nasty on Dan Ige's part, and Dan Ige is a very solid striker, but then Damon Jackson is a guy that I just don't love the striking of. I think he looks kind of slow on the feet. He does have some good grappling, and I will give that to him. He has some good control time, and he did control Dan Argueta. And I will say this much. I'm surprised I didn't bring this up for John Matsumoto and Dan Argueta. Another reason why I am picking John Matsumoto is because Damon Jackson was able to control Dan Argueta for the first 2 rounds. And although Damon Jackson does slow down, I am still... Okay, wait, sorry. Let me retrace that. He controlled Dan Argueta for I want to say 2 rounds, something like that. And he had a lot of success reversing Dan Argueta and kind of showed that Dan Argueta isn't the greatest grappler that we have ever seen. Dan Argueta has been taken down, and I think there's a world where John Matsumoto shoots takedowns and wins that fight. I am getting way sidetracked right now, so let's go back on track. Damon Jackson has good grappling. He can find takedowns, but Alexander Hernandez has shown good takedown defense, has a wrestling background, and I think Damon Jackson's going to have to be very selective with the takedowns that he does shoot because Alexander Hernandez has very real power. He did miss weight. But it was by like 1.5 pounds. What was weird is he weighed in at 150, and then he was able to cut another 1.5 pounds and potentially give him more time. He could potentially make that because I don't know how he's able to cut like 1.5 pounds. I want to say in like an hour or less, something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but he's got good power. He's got good takedown defense, and on the feet, Damon Jackson gets hit. And for that reason, I think Alexander Hernandez finds his KO, but they both don't have the greatest cardio. Damon Jackson has the better cardio, but he has slowed down before in fights that are high pace. And Alexander Hernandez has slowed down in fights that are high-paced as well. So this is an interesting one. I'm going to go with the guy that has the finishing potential. Typically, the guys that miss weights just end up winning fights. So we're going to go with Alexander Hernandez. Him missing weight might also mean that he is sick, but we'll see. I think it's just because he is a big featherweight. I trust his knockout power. I don't trust the striking of Damon Jackson. I don't mind his takedown entries that much, but he's getting up there in age, and he's taking a lot of damage. And what was his most recent fight? Let me just bring this up so I can make sure I have everything that I want to bring up. Oh, it was against Billy Gorantillo. I already brought that up. It wasn't him looking good in that fight, in my opinion. I think it was Billy Q just not looking that good. And I think that was Billy Q's return fight from getting knocked out from Edson Barbosa. Let me double check that because I don't want to be waffling to you guys. That was true. Yes. Okay. So, I mean, Damon Jackson, I've just never really been that impressed with the striking game, never been that impressed with the takedown entries, and for that reason, I'm picking Alexander Hernandez because I think when it's on the feet, he should be the better striker, even if he's not the more technical striker. When he lands, it's going to hurt Damon Jackson more than the other fighters in the past. So, Alexander Hernandez, round 2 KO, I'm going to say towards the early half of round 2. Let's move on to the main event, Chris Curtis versus Brenden Allen. I'm going with Brenden Allen, and reluctantly, and because I said that, Chris Curtis is going to brutally KO Brenden Allen like we have never, ever seen before, because I can't pick a Chris Curtis fight to save my damn life. And maybe that's just me being a dumbass, but to be honest with you, there's a couple of fights he could have ended up winning, right? Against Kelvin Gastelum, if he doesn't get headbutt, he can win that fight. I picked Joaquin Buckley over him. And I would pick Joaquin Buckley in a rematch. I think the main reason why Joaquin Buckley got KO'd is because he's dumb enough to throw a head kick in a same stance battle and landed on the back of Chris Curtis, where he then got countered with the hook. If he doesn't throw that head kick and doesn't spam head kicks just in every single fight and does it in a same stance battle, doesn't think he doesn't get KO'd, and he probably wins that fight because he was outclassing Chris Curtis for almost that entire fight. Anyways, I picked him against Jack Hermanson, and that was a bad pick. I've underestimated Jack Hermanson time and time again, and I kind of understand how that fight goes now. And Jack Hermanson, you could argue, would beat Brenden Allen. And Brenden Allen has not taken on good competition, so I kind of want to go with Chris Curtis. But at the same time, Brenden Allen has shown improvements in his game that I don't think Chris Curtis has shown. To me, Chris Curtis, from what I have watched in every single one of his fights, I did pick him against Adolfo Vieira. I think he might have actually been an underdog there. So I picked him against Marc-Andre Barriault too. So I'm not as bad as I claim to be. But like every single time, I kind of trust him as an underdog. I sprinkle on Chris Curtis as an underdog because, oh, he did it against Phil Hawes and Brenden Allen before. So why wouldn't he be able to do it against Jack Hermanson? Why wouldn't he be able to do it against Gastelum and Imavov? It just doesn't make sense. He always loses. So my track record with Chris Curtis isn't that good. And for that reason, I'm not betting this fight. It's not happening. I thought that Marc-Andre Barriault, had he stuck to the same game plan he stuck to in the first round, could have won that fight, but he decided to trade with Chris Curtis in the pocket, and he lost. And it was just destined in the freaking stars or whatnot for every Canadian man on that card to lose. That was not my greatest prediction of a card. That was not my greatest card of predictions. That was my last negative card of predictions. Let's hope we don't go negative for this one. But Brenden Allen, say what you want. He has had some layup fights. Sam Alvey, out of the UFC. Jacob Malkoun, actually a pretty decent win, but that was a very close decision. Some people thought Jacob Malkoun could have won. I thought it could have gone either way. When it comes down to it, it's still not the most insane win. And it's not a super crazy win to have on your resume, especially when we don't really see him against many great strikers. Krzysztof Jotko, I think he's out of the UFC right by now. He's not that good. Sure, he finished him. Congratulations to him, but wasn't really that good against Andre Muniz. He then goes out there and doesn't have the greatest performance. I know he beat Andre Muniz. Congratulations to him. But Andre Muniz was landing some very big shots on Brenden Allen that I do not like to see, and that makes me believe, well, maybe Chris Curtis has had the style all along. And this is going to be another fight where I'm just underestimating Chris Curtis, but I do think that Brenden Allen is going to be the fighter, frozen at range, doing everything he can to stay away from the pocket against Chris Curtis, not trading, not really trusting his hands, not really looking for the finish on the feet, looking for takedowns. And I think he might be able to get him, and maybe he finds a submission, because here's the thing. If he gets it back of Chris Curtis, Brenden Allen's rear naked choke is really, really good. He submitted Andre Muniz with it, submitted Paul Craig with it, Bruno Silva as well. Really, really good rear naked choke. Probably the best rear naked choke in the middleweight division. Maybe I'm forgetting about someone right now, but fantastic rear naked choke. And if he is able to get the back of Chris Curtis, and it might not even be him finding takedowns. It could be one of those scenarios where he fails the takedown and climbs the back like a Charles Oliveira. I was going to say Renato Moicano because that's what I said for Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. But, I mean, these jiu-jitsu guys that sometimes don't find takedowns are able to climb to the back. And if they get your back, some of them are so good with the rear naked choke, that's all they need, and they will finish fights that way. And that could be Brenden Allen in this matchup. I think he's going to get this done with a pretty boring decision where he finds a couple of takedowns. Chris Curtis does everything he can just to survive, and on the feet he's getting frozen from the long range of Brenden Allen. I think Brenden Allen will get this done, and I'm going to say by decision. But Chris Curtis is a live dog. I don't think I'm going to throw money on him because I don't like betting in any Chris Curtis fights. I don't care if he is facing Francis Ngannou. And Francis Ngannou is a plus 500 underdog. If I put anything on Francis Ngannou, Chris Curtis is going to beat Francis Ngannou. That is not always the case. I have won a little bit of money on Chris Curtis, and I'm over-exaggerating it, but he's hard to predict for me. I have underestimated him and overrated him at times. But I will say this much. Brenden Allen has not been proven on the feet. Bruno Silva is not a good test on the feet. I was really low on Bruno Silva. I almost picked Chris Weidman against him. I was telling you guys not to bet Bruno Silva in that matchup, and that Chris Weidman was an underdog play. I bet money on Chris Weidman, and I won money on Chris Weidman because I told you how bad Bruno Silva was. Not a good fight, and he got clipped on the feet against Bruno Silva. Andre Muniz, he was getting tagged by a couple of big shots. Not a good look, not the greatest look. Now, he obviously did have success and beat Andre Muniz on the ground, who is a very high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner, so that is very impressive. Paul Craig, I don't think he was really getting beat up or hurt all that badly, but a lot of grappling in that fight, and he showed to be the better grappler with the better hands, but Paul Craig sucks. We all know it. It's true. His striking sucks, and Brenden Allen had a good enough submission game to where I could trust him pretty heavily in that matchup. Fair amount of people picking Paul Craig there, too. I was pretty surprised by that. But anyways, Brenden Allen is more well-rounded. He might even be, and I don't know, I don't want to say the more technical striker, because he might be a little bit better at range, but he's not proven to be the more technical striker. But he is kind of the more technical striker. I think he'll fight this fight in a very technical striking type of fashion, and he's going to fight the type of striking fight that Chris Curtis despises, and Chris Curtis is going to be crying all damn fight, and then Brenden Allen's going to shoot a couple of takedowns, drag him down, and maybe get his back a couple of times. And I think Chris Curtis's takedown defense is a little bit overrated, and it was overrated. And I've been saying this because, okay, he stuffed takedowns from Rodolfo Vieira. Where has he shown this fantastic takedown defense? He had 100% takedown defense rate, and then he got taken down multiple times by Nasruddin Imavov. And I know people are saying, well, Nasruddin Imavov has wicked wrestling. Okay, I haven't really seen this Dagestani crazy wrestling from Nasruddin Imavov that leads me to believe that Chris Curtis still has some of the best takedown defense we have ever seen. Because some people talk about Chris Curtis's takedown defense like it's some folklore of like the greatest mythical trait of all time, and I just don't think that's the case. I think Brenden Allen may find takedowns here, and if he does, he can potentially find a submission. But I'll say he wins this by decision. I'll say 49-46, boring fight. But I could also see a Chris Curtis KO, and I could also see a Brenden Allen submission. I don't really see a KO for Brenden Allen, but everything is possible. Who knows? The smaller apex does favor Chris Curtis. But yeah, that's going to conclude this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. My prediction for Pedro Falcao versus Victor Hugo will be out tomorrow. Make sure to tune into that. If there's any questions you have about this card or any predictions that you disagree with, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. I am very open-minded. Make sure to like and subscribe. And we are almost to UFC 300. We have made it through all of these fun, fantastic UFC Apex cards, and now we get to enjoy UFC 300. So thank you guys so much for staying with the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.